from the Raiders. There was always the expectation that they would get this worked out. They continued conversations at the owners' meetings, reached the agreement today, and Geno Smith is now tied to Las Vegas for the next 3 years.
All right, so a lot to unpack here either way as we welcome you into the show. And congratulations to Geno Smith. Mike Tannenbaum is here, Mina Kimes, Adam Schefter, of course, Matt Miller joins us a little bit later on for some draft news. Mina, I'll start with you. What do you think now that we have this deal for Geno Smith and the Raiders?
I think this is a great deal for the Raiders. When you look at the extension you added on to his existing contract, you're looking at 3 years, under $40 million a year. That is outside the top 15 for quarterback salaries in terms of annual average per year. I think that's a bargain. I've talked a lot about Geno Smith and what he brings to the table. Last year was a down year from a production standpoint, but if you dig a little deep into the numbers, a couple of stats I think that are pertinent to Raiders fans. Again, only in 2024, Geno Smith was second league-wide behind Joe Burrow in on-target percentage and fourth in completions percentage over expected. What that shows, I believe, is that in some pretty adverse circumstances in Seattle in terms of the pressure and the lack of run-pass balance in that offense, he was, above all, an accurate thrower of the football. It is not surprising to me that in addition to Pete Carroll wanting to reunite with him, Tom Brady saw that and liked it and probably 100% signed off on this deal. I think they still have to continue adding to the offense. Well, I suspect in the first round they will add a skill player, but I believe they've got a lot to work with, and I'm optimistic for Geno Smith this year.
Mina, I see it very similarly. I think the offseason of stability for the Raiders continued today. First, they go out and get Pete Carroll, a stabilizing person at head coach. They acquired Geno Smith for a relatively fair price of a third-round pick, stabilizes the quarterback position, and as you allude to, a very fair average per year. Is he a top 10 quarterback? Probably not, but I do think with a better offensive line, and certainly not ideal at the skill players, but having Brock Bowers, you have a stabilizing quarterback for at least the next couple of years. I think it's a certainty they go skill players. A lot of people, myself included, think it could be Ashton Genty at 6, and now Pete Carroll may have his Marshawn Lynch beast mode player. We'll see about that. But this is another meaningful step in the rebuilding of the Raiders.
And look, essentially they give Geno Smith a deal that's a little bit more than Seattle gave Sam Darnold. Seattle sat down with Geno Smith, and it quickly became evident that the two sides were not going to be able to reach an agreement. I think Geno Smith had his eyes on Las Vegas. The Seahawks made him happy. They sent him to Las Vegas, which was willing to pay Geno Smith more than the Seahawks. The Seahawks go on to Sam Darnold, and with today's deal, because at this time of the year, everything is relative to the draft, I think this almost clinches the fact that the Las Vegas Raiders will bypass a quarterback in the first round. Maybe they revisit it in an early round later on, but it's hard to imagine that they go and give Geno Smith $75 million today and then turn around 3 weeks later and draft a quarterback in the first round. I don't think they're taking a page from the Falcons playbook in terms of the plays that they're going to run here.
I see what you did there.
But if they do, you're dressed for the Falcons as well?
I am. Look at me. This is also, by the way, we'll dive into the draft element of this a little bit later on in the show, too. You don't want to miss that. But it's such a good story, you guys. Geno Smith made 5 starts in 6 seasons total from 2015 to 2020, and then led the NFL in completion percentage with the Seahawks in 2022. So congratulations to Geno Smith and his work that he's done. Now, the Raiders got Geno Smith his deal, but as far as the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson go, there's still a lot to figure out there. Trey Hendrickson spoke yesterday. That's where we go next.
I've been open and transparent about however it looks for me in Cincinnati or not.
If you're Trey Hendrickson, you're looking at all your buddies getting paid, and you're starting to wonder, hey, you guys could have just told me, like, I'm on deck, and I have no problem being patient.
I'm training to be the best Trey Hendrickson I can be, and however that looks, and whatever team, we can address that.
That's a bad look for the organization, and it looks like they told them one thing and doing another.
I have prepared my family for if we're not there, is that, something we're willing to do.
All right, let's get Adam back in here. What is going on with Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals right now, Adam?
Well, Laura, it looks like a trade is more unlikely, but the longer this goes on, there's no solution, there's no clarity in sight. You just don't know what's going to happen as the draft approaches. And the Bengals have made him an offer. The two sides have gone back and forth at various points They seem to have made progress, but it seems like there was a step back the other day when the Bengals executive, Katie Blackburn, met with members of the Cincinnati media and essentially spelled out that Trey Hendrickson should be happy with what they're offering, and that's the offer right now. And I don't think that sat well with Trey Hendrickson, who's looking for a deal on par with some of the big pass rushing deals that have gone around this offseason, which, again, last season he led the NFL in sacks. They didn't pay him last offseason. He asked for a trade. Neither got done, a contract or a trade. They're back at it again. So this just has continued to go round and round without a solution in sight. You'd like to think that the Bengals and a player as important as Trey Hendrickson would figure this out and move forward together. But again, this seems to change on an almost weekly basis.
All right, now's the portion of the program where we continue to become Trey Hendrickson's agents, which we don't need to because the proof's in the pudding. But he became the only Bengal to lead the league in sacks since the stat became official in 1982. He accounted for a higher percentage of his team's sacks than any player in the last 5 seasons. And look at the rest of this list, okay? Those are the guys in the list. They all got paid in the last 13 months, so it makes sense why he would want to be on that level. Mina, have the Bengals made a mistake here with Hendrickson?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right? Because they shouldn't be at this point. I think Adam alluded to this. The other deals coming in. The one I look at is the Max Crosby extension, because I don't think Trey Hendrickson, obviously I'm speculating here, expects to be paid what Myles Garrett is making in Cleveland. But as deals like the Crosby one came in, if I'm Trey Hendrickson, I'm absolutely looking at that and thinking, okay, that's about what I deserve based on my production, based on what I've done for this defense. You pointed to his overall contributions as a percentage of sacks. That reflects not only how good Trey Hendrickson is, but also how poorly they've drafted, and on their defensive line around him. I think for the Bengals, the ideal outcome at this point, again, given the construction of the roster and how much money they're spending on a few players, would still be to get a very high draft pick for him. But I increasingly don't think that's likely. And if that's the case, you want to get a deal done and hope you can hit on defense in the draft. But they're in a difficult position of their own making.
Here's what scares me, guys. Go back a couple of years ago, Jalen Ramsey held in Jacksonville, wouldn't practice, said his back hurt, gets traded to the Rams, gets his extension. The rest is history. Under the CBA, we don't see holdouts anymore. But if I was running the Bengals, I would be scared to death that a 30-year-old in his prime pass rusher who's scheduled to only make $16 million a year, and we don't get a deal done, and he does exactly that. He goes to camp and says, you know what, my back is tight. And to Mina's point, this was a team that was moribund on defense, and all they added was Joe Asai in this offseason. So here's a guy that's had 35 sacks over the last 2 years. He's almost averaging 20% in terms of getting double teamed. They need him. They need him all in. They did a great job addressing the receiver position. But this is a must-have. This is not a nice-to-have. This is an in-your-prime, difference-making pass rusher. And again, if I'm the Bengals, I look at that Jacksonville situation for a few years ago, and I have to do everything within reason, Laura, to avoid that.
We brought this up yesterday, too, but this is also an A-plus person. This is a person who makes your locker room better. He makes your team better as a whole. He's somebody that is going to be great for your franchise on that side of things as well. You just got to figure out something.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Ngày hôm nay mình sẽ tiếp tục hướng dẫn các bạn câu tượng. Tượng hôm nay của mình sẽ có tiêu đề là caro. Các bạn hôm nay tượng của mình sẽ có tiêu đề là cá ngựa.